Hey guys, it's Kevin again. This is my review for Better Call Saul Season 1, Episode 2, Mijo, and that was the perfect title for this episode. So of course I love the first episode, and I was looking forward to this episode. Obviously, I absolutely love the first episode, and this episode was better than the first episode. I enjoyed it more. I thought that there was a lot of better stuff in it. Having Tuco back was actually added something to the show that I don't think the first episode had, and that was some threatening violence. I mean, really, there were some really threatening moments in this episode, some really tense moments, and I loved it. And I'm loving the show so far, but let's just get into it because it was amazing. So, we start off right away, and Tuco is chopping vegetables when his grandma comes in with Lars and Cal ranting about how the crazy old woman ran his brother down. And Tuco tells his grandma everything is fine, then tells her to go upstairs and watch her show. And Tuco tells them to be quiet, and the second he told her that, I'm just like, he's gonna do something to them. Because, like, my friend told me Tuco's very threatening and things like that, and I know stuff about Tuco. I know that he can take out someone just with a punch, and, he basically tells them to be quiet and tells his grandma to go turn up the TV really loud, so she doesn't have to deal with this, and she goes upstairs muttering to herself in Spanish, and they ask Tuco what he's gonna do to them. They don't know what he's gonna do. Seriously, you don't know what he's gonna do? He's this big tough guy. What's he gonna do? Tuco asks if they want money. Lars says it's a felony. They tell him they can call the cops, and then Tuco takes off his apron, says you called her Biznak. They threaten to send off his granny to jail. Tuco hits them both with his grandma's walker, calls them Biznak, beats them both in the face, and I honestly thought they were dead. That is how deadly Tuco is, and honestly, that was awesome to see. He is really deadly, and I love seeing that because it works for people like me who are not Breaking Bad fans, who, haven't seen Breaking Bad. Well, I'm a Breaking Bad fan, I just haven't seen Breaking Bad. And that makes any sense, which it doesn't, but it just really shows how deadly this guy is. And honestly, I did not think that guy was that deadly. Wow, he is deadly. Wow, that was insane. Definitely very crazy. So, Tuco's grandma watches her telenovela, ignores the thumping noises from downstairs. Eventually, she goes and calls out to her Mijo, who Mijo means son, grandson. And she goes to the stairs and looks down. She sees him scrubbing the carpet, and he says the men are gone. And there's nothing to worry about. And the whole time, like, where's Saul? What has he done to Saul? What has he done to Jimmy? Because of course, we knew he took Jimmy into his house, and we didn't know what was going to happen. I was just like, what did he do to Jimmy? Because I knew that he took Jimmy, and I was like, what do you do to Jimmy at this point? So she sees him scrubbing the carpet, and she asks if she's in trouble, but he says they won't bother her again. She sees a red stain on her carpet, and he says just salsa. He tells her to go watch her telenovela and let him take care of it. She tells him to use club soda, and he scrubs while she goes back to her show. Then makes a call to someone and tells him to get over there now. He says to bring Nacho, his van, and some Nodos. There's a knock at the door, and we find out this is actually before Jimmy was at the door, which I thought was well done because, I mean, it makes us think that, it shows how tough Tuco is. It shows us what kind of person he is, and just shows us that you should not mess with Tuco, which I like seeing. I thought that was well done. At first, it was like, I don't know if I like that, but then it was like, you know what? Yeah, we have to see how menacing he is, and that really showed how menacing he is, which I loved. So he sees Jimmy at the doorstep, then sees him trying to peek into the windows, grabs a gun hidden at the top of the china cabinet, opens the door, points the gun at Jimmy, drags him inside, and Jimmy puts up his hands and says he's not threatening him. For the first half of the episode, it focuses on Tuco and Jimmy being held hostage, and this was definitely very entertaining to see Jimmy held hostage. I mean, definitely pretty crazy. So Jimmy puts his hands up, says he's not threatening him. Tuco tells him he's dead if he moves, flips him around and searches him while Jimmy asks if Betsy Kettleman is there. And he says he got a call from some clients about an accident call. He says he didn't get any details, but saw the skateboards in the yard. And Tuco's grandma comes out and asks if he's with the other guys, but Tuco says he's just a salesman. He promises to get the club soda, but said she's worried the stain will dry. So he finally gets her to go back upstairs. Tuco sits and tells Jimmy to talk. He thinks that he's the salesman when he's really not. Of course, he's a lawyer. We know that. We know that he's a lawyer. Sorry guys about the tissue. I got it. My nose is all stuffy. I'm sorry about that. But basically, it was probably his fault. He says they used poor judgment and followed his grandmother home, said they then said or did something that crossed a line, and Jimmy says that he was just justified in putting them in their place, and judging by the salsa stain, there's no need to kill him. This episode made me want chips and dip, really, just because of how much salsa we saw. I had cheese dip with this, just so you guys know. I don't know why I'm saying that, but I thought I'd say that. So, he says that he can collect the idiots and leave, and they'll never see them again. Jimmy says they're assuming they're still breathing, and Tuco says, wow. He tells Jimmy he has a mouth on him. Jimmy says thanks. He tells Jimmy to get up and points him to the garage. Jimmy sees Lars and Cal bound and gagged, hands Jimmy a knife, and asks if he should cut them loose. He goes over to the guys and cuts their gags. And this is insane what's going on here. Very, very crazy at this point. So Lars says if it was Jimmy's idea to scam them. Tuco points the gun at Jimmy. He asks if he's punking his abuela. And Jimmy says Lars has a brain injury and doesn't know what he's saying. Puts a gun to Lars's head and says it was the lawyer's idea to jump in front of her car and get $2,000. Points the gun at Jimmy again, who flinches and cowers. And Jimmy is dropped in the desert, duct taped and bound. Tuco stares at him. Lars and Cal are in the same boat. And Tuco asks Jimmy who he is and why he's after him. And Jimmy says he was running a scam on Betsy Kettleman, and says the guy stole $1.5 million from the country, and he says he wanted them to run the skateboard scam on her to help him get their business. And he says Tuco's abuela drives a similar car, and they jumped in front of the wrong car. He says it was his simple mistake, and one of the other guys gets the toolbox, and Jimmy says they don't need to do this. He basically says he'll talk, and he just needs to tell him what he needs to know. And Tuco says he smells lies and basically thinks that Jimmy's a cop. And this whole scene, it's like, something bad's not going to happen to Jimmy, but it's very intense. But at the same time, it's very funny as well, because of how much of a wise guy Jimmy is and how much of a smartass he is. So he goes to cut off Jimmy's finger, but he tells Tuco to check his pocket, finds a matchbox, and then tosses it away. Jimmy says to ask him any question about the law. Then when Tuco goes to cut his finger off, Jimmy says he's an FBI special agent. Tuco seems to believe that, and I thought it was interesting that Tuco actually believed Jimmy. He seemed like he was too smart for him, but he actually believed him, which I found interesting. I didn't think he'd actually believe that. So Tuco's buddy asks what business are they in, and they're being investigated for, and Jimmy says drugs. Then he says the task force is called it's called Kingbreaker, and Tuco is happy, says that makes him the king. The guy kneels in front of him, and he asks who he is, and Jimmy says his name is James Morgan McGill. He was trolling for business. He says he made up the FBI thing. He says it was just a mistake that he takes responsibility for, and he says he doesn't know their names and his face blindness. And I'm just like, Jimmy, why did you tell them that you were lying about that? Like, it's not gonna end well for you now. Like, seriously, why would you tell them that you were lying? It's not gonna end well for you, obviously. It's not going to. So basically, he says Lars and Cal forget it too, and the skaters losers nod. Jimmy says they want to just go home. Tuco and his buddy talk. He tells Tuco to cut them loose. He said the FBI would not be working with these two idiots, and nods at Cal and Lars. He says croaking a lawyer for no good reason is no smart business. Tuco says they came into his house and called his abuela Biznak, and he says the lawyer is getting respect. Tuco agrees, and Tuco's buddy says he knows how to find Jimmy and asks if he gets that. Jimmy nods and then the guy cuts him loose. He asks Jimmy if he's okay. Tuco says to take him back to his car, and he asks about Lars and Cal, but the guy tells Jimmy to come on. Tuco pulls out a knife, and Jimmy asks to say something. He says they don't deserve to die since he put them up to it, and Tuco says he's going to skin them. Jimmy says they're insects and says to think about their mother, and I love he's doing whatever he can to get himself out of this, and it's so funny to see because Jimmy is just again, it could be a very intense scene, but he says so many wisecracks that it's so funny. Jimmy tells him, Jimmy says their mother is a hard worker, a widow who scrubs the floors of rich people, even though she's old. Jimmy says those boys are all she has. He says if Tuco skins them, she'll be devastated. Jimmy says Tuco is tough but fair and is all about justice. Jimmy says those two will never forget together and will be crapping their pants for years to come. Jimmy asks Tuco to consider what's the right sentence, and Tuco tells him like a judge, and Jimmy tells him eye for an eye, and Tuco says he should blind them. Jimmy says he's advising him to make the punishment fit the crime, and Tuco repeats that and then says Colombian neckties. And Jimmy suggests they giving them black eyes. Yeah, I love that he's just like, just give him black eyes, because he doesn't want to make them suffer that much. And I thought that was really funny that he's just like, give him black eyes. That's the most will torture them. I thought that was really funny. And so basically, Tuco repeats that, and then basically Jimmy suggests spraining their ankles so they can skate, and Tuco says he'll break their arms and legs, so that says he'll cut their legs off. Jimmy says they're hanging the wrong direction. He tries to talk them down to breaking one leg each for a total of 2 legs. He says they can't skate for 6 months and they'll be scared of him forever. And he says that will show that Tuco is fair and just, and Tuco agrees to 1 leg each. Jimmy shakes it, says that's tough but fair. The guy comes over, tells the boys to quit moving, and Tuco jumps up and then onto the other. It's a hard scene to watch, but at the same time, it's kind of funny because Jimmy agreed to it, so The guys come over, tell the boys to keep moving. Tuco jumps up, then onto the other. He breaks his leg, then move on to the other guy. Jimmy winces as this goes down, and then one of the kids says to him, "You are a horrible, horrible lawyer." And that was so funny to see. He just like, "You're a horrible lawyer," and that was really funny. So the second half of the episode focuses less on this and more on just Jimmy, and I thought this was overall very good what we saw there. um, Jimmy's out on a date with this girl. I have to say, this scene that we saw Jimmy in, I thought something was wrong with my TV. I did. At first, when we didn't hear any dialogue, I'm like, is something wrong with my TV here? What's going on? Like, I thought something was wrong with the channel or something. So, I thought that was really weird. Because literally, they're talking and there's dialogue, but you're not hearing anything. All you hear is music. So, that's kind of weird. So, basically, they're not really having a conversation. They're not really it's not really working out for them. And yeah, so they're not exactly getting off to a conversation and everything. So they go on a date, and it doesn't exactly end up working out. But whatever. We then see this really cool montage. I definitely really enjoyed this. So basically, that's what happens there after that, and we see. Okay, what happens after that? Okay, hang on 1 second, guys. He's trying to woo this pretty lady on a date. However, the snapping of breadsticks in the background is forcing him to relive the leg breaking, and it's making him impossible to focus on his usual charms, and he ends up abandoning the date just because of how bad the date was. I love that he just abandoned her. He gets violently drunk and vomiting in the bathroom, and he heads home, and he doesn't go home, though. He drives to Chuck's, and he's so drunk that he makes the mistake of bringing his phone inside with him. And, basically Chuck throws it onto the lawn, and he's so like drunk at this point. It's so funny to see drunk Jimmy. Like, it was so funny. And I do have one thing to say. Why does Chuck have a problem with cell phones? Like, I don't know if they really established that, because they didn't really talk about that in the first episode. So why does Chuck have a problem with cell phones? I don't understand that. I just don't understand why, because I don't think they really talked about that. If they did, I guess I wasn't paying attention, but I don't really think they established why Chuck has a problem with cell phones. So he makes a mistake of bringing his phone inside with him. Not sure if this is a mistake or for tracking purposes. Chuck is clearly in hideout for his paranoia about radiation. That's really what it's about. That he has this, that paranoia for radiation, and because he's subsequently wrapping himself in a space blanket. And Chuck throws it onto the lawn, then wraps himself in some soft of aluminum blanket. And this whole scene was so funny. Chuck also finds the urgent care bill for the broken legs, and basically he has a lot of explaining to do, and he assures Chuck that he's not back to his old ways, which we find out that Slippin' Jimmy was actually a real person, and I thought that was interesting because I knew it. I knew that that'd be real. I didn't know if it would, but apparently we find out that, yeah, Jimmy was actually that way, and that's really interesting to find that out, that Slippin' Jimmy was a real person. So I'm wondering if we're actually going to see flashbacks. I know this is a show, I know this takes place in the past, but we still could see flashbacks of that. You never know. I would like to see that, actually. I'd like to see what Jimmy was like back in the olden days. I think that'd be interesting to see. Something I definitely would want to see is see how Jimmy was back then, because I think it could be just really interesting to see, definitely. So he assures Chuck he's not back to his old ways, and he departs to search for his phone, and basically, um, it's actually really funny here, him searching for his phone. Doesn't know where it is, and he keeps telling Chuck, take off the space blanket, and he's like, no, take off the space blanket. And I thought that was really funny. He just like, take off the damn space blanket. And I thought that was really funny that Chuck just wouldn't take off the space blanket. Definitely, that had me cracking up. So we then see a great montage. This was just awesome to see. I love seeing this. I think it's really supposed to show how repetitive Jimmy's life is sometimes, because we see basically a montage of his daily life. Him defending, a bunch of hodgepodge of criminals. And again, you can kind of see that the criminals he's dealing with, just the cases he's with, they're kind of dumb. They're dumb cases. I mean, the last case he was dealing with was all about, like, making a video and everything. Like, definitely very weird cases, and he still is involved in that, and you kind of see how I think he's getting a little sick of it. He stares himself straight in the mirror, flashes his palms wide open, and says it's showtime. That was so funny to see. Definitely, just a hilarious scene. That was definitely a very funny scene. And then we see Mike continues to give him a very difficult time at the courtroom toil, and basically, Jimmy's going nuts with that. Such a funny scene, just so funny. I thought that was just hilarious to see. Just really funny stuff there overall. I definitely really enjoyed that. Um, So back in the nail salon, Jimmy pours himself a stiff drink into a pathetic plastic cup before he's interrupted by a customer. And, he's at the nail salon and everything. And I'm like, why is he back in the nail salon? I guess this is going to be like a regular place he goes. And it turns out Jimmy has met this customer before. He's actually one of Tuco's friends from earlier. It is Nacho. And he wants to pull a fast one on the original targets of the skateboarding heist. And basically, he tells Jimmy that he likes ripping off thieves because they can't go to the cops. And he's like, you tell me where they hid their cash, I'll pay you. Let's call it a finder's fee. And Jimmy, though, despite what we all might believe, does not consider himself a criminal. He doesn't want to steal. He, basically he's apathetic, but he urges Jimmy to call him. And when he realizes that, obviously he's playing the game. He leaves his number and, of course, a very open door to thievery. And basically, what this is trying to show is, I guess, when Jimmy was first introduced, my friend told me this. When Jimmy was first introduced on Breaking Bad, he told Walt and, you know, Jesse that basically Walt didn't realize that how good of a lawyer he was, and Jesse told Walt that he had bailed out some of Tuco's men. So you can definitely see that James and Nacho might actually, Jimmy and Nacho might actually been working together. So that's gonna be interesting to see as well. I'm definitely interested in that. Now I definitely want to talk about Chuck. Very interesting with Chuck, definitely. The way this is going. One of the things I forgot to say last night that I definitely forgot to mention was the directing, the cinematography in the show. I forgot to talk about it. The directing in the show is awesome. I love the tone of the show, definitely. Just awesome directing. Cinematography in the show is awesome as well. I think it's good that this was a back-to-back for me because this episode was definitely better than the first one. Plus, this one had all the action that the first one didn't. Because I know one of the problems people had was that it didn't feel like Breaking Bad. This episode was very intense, but it still had that comedic approach to it, which I like because it differentiates itself from Breaking Bad, which is what I want it to do. I don't want it to be too much like Breaking Bad, and it's not too much like Breaking Bad because it differentiates itself with the comedic approach, which I like. The scene with Jimmy and Mike, just hilarious stuff there. I like seeing Mike again, very funny. I definitely want to talk about Chuck. I think Chuck is a very interesting character. What's going to happen with Chuck? I mean, it definitely seems like Chuck is paranoid of cell phone, things like that, about radiation. Eventually, he's going to need to realize that there really is no radiation. There's nothing to worry about. He seems like so paranoid about that. And I don't really know why exactly he's so paranoid. Saul and that date, I don't know if we're going to continue seeing that, but that's going to be interesting to see. Tuco, I definitely feel like we're going to see Tuco again. I think Tuco is just an awesome character to see. I have to say, one of the things this show does very well is making those tie-ins to Breaking Bad. It really makes you care, like, want to see the show more. Honestly, again, it's making me want to see Breaking Bad. I've said this. I said this last night. I'll say it again. It's making me want to see Breaking Bad. This episode really made me want to see Breaking Bad, and last night's episode really made me want to see Breaking Bad. And I like that the show does that. I think it's very well done. They do that, and that's one of my things that I'm really loving about the show. The other thing the show does very well, as I said, is that it's very funny. I was laughing quite a lot in this episode. I was laughing quite a lot in last night's episode. Definitely, I'm really liking the comedy. Now, the cinematography in the show is just perfect. The black and white thing in the beginning of last night's episode was just amazing. There wasn't any of that in this, but I will say that the thing that I think was just as grasping was the chopping of the salsa. I think that really sucked you in, because I'm just like, this is really intense. Like, the chopping of the salsa definitely sucked you into that. And I like that they do that. If they keep starting out episodes with just, like, close-ups of people, like, chopping up food, I think it's going to be really interesting if they do that. And I like they do that because I think that's interesting. Definitely. The editing in the show is perfect as well. I definitely want to talk about the screenplay. Screenplay is so funny. Such a good screenplay. I think the screenplay just works perfectly in this show. Absolutely love the screenplay. But overall, guys, that's all I have to say about this episode. Not really too much to say about this episode. Overall, guys, I thought this was a good episode. Actually an amazing episode. Best episode. Loving the show already. Definitely, I feel like this is going to be a show where every episode gets better and better and better. But let me know what you guys saw of this episode overall. That's my review. Hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys in my next video, which will be my review for a movie review. So I'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.